All right, so please ignore the birds. As you can tell, I've already installed the water pump, and obviously the cam tower is missing. Here's the old one. I lost the intro video again, not sure what's going on. So this will be the intro, the after the install intro video. So replacing a water pump on a Porsche 944 early. A few things to note is if you're doing it on maintenance, it is recommended that you swap this guy out every other belt and balance shaft timing belt removal or replacement. Roughly speaking, if you're going by years, they usually say your timing belts go about 2.5 years. I let them go 3 years, but regardless, it's usually recommended 2.5. There's also a mileage recommendation, which is about 30,000 per. So if you had 30,000, you should be looking at changing your timing belts. Reason I bring that up is since it's every other, that means that if you're going by that maintenance schedule and there's no signs of failure on the pump, you're not leaking any coolant in this area, then you're looking at swapping these guys out probably every 5 to 6 years. So just keep that in mind. So you do the belts the first time, the second time, you want to make sure you add that to the budget. So I'm also going to post a link to where I bought this. This is the metric water pump. I was a little bit leery because of how inexpensive it was. However, when I was doing my research and I went to the, and I'm not going to mention them specifically, but I went to the Porsche 944 sites, I found that this brand was actually listed on two of the more common sites. Since it's a new pump, I found this at Parts Geek for $64 total shipping to my location. $64 for a brand new water pump. So I'm pretty excited about that. Again, I wasn't familiar with the brand, and I'm not sponsored by them. I'm simply making you aware of, the one that I purchased, which fit nicely. Okay, so the intro video is just to kind of let you know the basic steps, things that are not going to be on the video. And you can look at my channel and look at the other videos that I've done. So the first things first is you want to remove the starter and put a flywheel lock and set the engine to TDC. The second is you're going to come up here and you're going to remove the alternator belt and air compressor belt. Move that aside. Then you're going to remove the front cover. That goes here, the front plastic cover, black one. It's got 10mm bolts. After which you're going to remove all the pulleys from the balance shaft, from the crankshaft here, the idler pulleys, and the eccentric rollers that do the tightening for the balance and the timing belts. Once that's removed, you're going to have the back cover that sits on top of here, and you're going to have five, I think 10mm bolts that you pull, thus giving it way to the water pump. The next videos will explain the steps after that. I just wanted to kind of mention just briefly the maintenance schedule and what you have to do to get to the water pump, since I'm in the middle of a project, as you can tell. So first step once you get here is to come over here, and right there is the drain plug for the radiator. So in the next video, let's start with draining the coolant. Now, I still have the radiator shroud here. However, I did take all the bolts off already. I just put it back in because I had to position the car further back. Regardless, I always take this off to give myself about another 2.5 to 3 inches of clearance. And when you're working on the front, you come on the the driver's side of the radiator, and you'll notice right there, that's your drain plug. So you want to make sure you clear everything out because it's going to shoot with force. You want to have a bucket or something ready for it. And just with the screwdriver, you get it in here, you unscrew it and let it all pour out. And again, you want to have your bucket close so that it catches all of that. So that's the first one. Now, if you're completely flushing the coolant, which I am, there is also another drain plug for the actual engine itself on the side of it. And that guy is right there. And I want to say that's a 13. It might be a 10, but I believe it's a 13. And as you can tell where I'm at, I'm sitting right below the exhaust. So this is on the passenger side of the engine. By removing that, you'll drain the block itself. of all the coolant that it has. So let me see if I can get it from on top. I don't think I will be able to, but it rests below the exhaust manifold on this side here, below the camshaft down there. Now, what I usually do, or what I will be doing, I don't know how detailed I'm going to get on this, is I'm going to, of course, drain everything from the radiator, which is from the first bolt that I showed, the plug. And then I will be removing that bolt, letting everything drain out as well. After which, what you do is you take this hose off its clamp and you put a hose here and you just let it run for a good 2 to 4 minutes, thus making sure you completely flush out all the fluid that was inside there. And of course you want to do that with this, or at least the radiator, the thermostat, the thermostat that sits in the housing of the water pump right here, which is what you're seeing right there. So again, I'm going to be doing that flush. I'm also going to be using this hose to flush the radiator by putting the hose up through both sides. So the first one is going to be there to go to the engine block, and the second time I'm going to put the hose in here so it goes into the radiator, snakes down all of it, and then just completely gets flushed. Okay, so I also want to point out a couple of things. When you are draining the radiator and you're getting ready to remove the plug, you want to make sure that your cap is loose or off, so that there's no pressure and it can completely just use gravity to drain out. It's currently happening. I also wanted to clarify a point here, is the drain plug that I showed you on the side of the engine, it's not necessary to remove that to take the water pump out. As long as there's enough water, or as long as the water sits below, which it does, the water pump, you won't need to drain what's in there. The reason I'm doing it today is because I'm doing a complete flush, because that is rather old coolant. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure and get rid of that. And also here is the radiator plug that sits down there. The only maintenance that you will ever have to do this plug is that little O-ring that sits right there. And you just kind of inspect it, and as long as it looks okay, and it looks like it's kind of wearing out for me, so I'm gonna run down to the auto parts store and maybe. So again, make sure that guy is open or off while you're draining, and it's just a process. Let it drain and then put the plug back in so it doesn't keep leaking. And let's get started on this water. Let's take a look exactly what we're gonna need. So by looking at the new water pump, we can see that we're going to have quite a bit of bolts. I want to say there's 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sorry, 10. That bolt is already going to be there if I'm not mistaken, so it's just going to go through. Okay, so we have 10 bolts. All of them are 10. And then looks like we're going to have a hose here, and we have the heater hose here. So this is the bottom radiator hose, which is this little bad boy right here. So all it has is a clamp. And then here's the clamp for the one leading all the way back to the heater core. So those two clamps and all those. All right, so let's get to it. Oh, I also want to point out, you're going to have different types of bolts. Some are going to look identical, and as you can tell, some of them actually, see, like that's a regular bolt. As you can tell, it looks more like a stud that's going through it, and it's just got the cover. So let's see, let's get down there. It's been a while since I did one. So let's take alrighty, folks. So I was able to take there you go. I was able to take the hose off here for the bottom radiator, and I'm noticing I have some material, obviously. So definitely gonna have to inspect the inside of this hose to see if it's still salvageable. If not, we may have to order one. Also, I just noticed something here, and I don't know why it dawned on me. So as I was taking it off, I realized, wow, this holds the water that goes, the coolant that goes into the heater core, as I mentioned. So it's gonna drain all the way from there to here, and anything, and again, this is all just gravity based. So if the fill level is up higher, which it semi is, it's gonna drain until that is the highest point. So when you're removing this, you want to be really careful. And also, since most of these are going to be old hoses, I'd be prepared to replace these, but at the same time, what you want to do is once you've loosened this, you're going to want to put like a, what I did is I put a small rag around them, and then I grabbed some channel locks. I put the rag so I wouldn't get them, and then I just kind of like slowly twisted them to break this apart somewhat. Otherwise, you're going to be struggling. I've seen some people grab some screwdrivers to get up under there. I even almost came prepared. I did the final part with this, so make sure you use a plastic wedge. But you never want to do more than just put it around the edges. You don't want to use it to pry it all the way back as much as you're going to be tempted to do so. So again, just some channel locks and a rag around here so you don't break it, just to kind of break the little seal, and you'll feel it. That'd be the best hit. But again, once this hose comes off, I lost. I started feeling that it was going to start dripping, so of course I grabbed a pan, placed it down there, and now I'm just allowing it to drop. So be careful, because if the car is too low, it's just going to flush out. Luckily mine was high enough, and then I lowered it just a little bit more to drain more now that it's good to go. So keep that in mind. All right, so the water pump is out, and I lined up all the bolts as I was taking them off to make sure I saw. I have an actual bolt kit, and I'll show that in the next little clip here. But of course, these were studs that it had, so I'll have to make sure I get those back in here. And they had actually locking washers. I don't know if you've seen those guys, but just to kind of point out, it looks like it wasn't just a flat washer. And all of these are just 10. It looks like they're 10 by, I don't know, what are those, 60? 10 by 60. And the only longer one was the one that was residing up here. Aside from that, they were all the same. So I did that on purpose. Again, I haven't done the water pump in some time. So I wanted to make sure, because again, this car was parked for a few years and I'm barely getting into it. So it's been a good 4 years since I've done this. Now, I will tell you this. You can see the pan back there. That you see how much coolant is there? Now my driveway is tilted, so I actually rolled it back so that I would have the majority of the engine, or so I would have the driveway help me with the tilt of the engine. And not that much drained out when I pulled it out. However, I was noticing that this line here, when I pulled it off, the top, the reservoir of the water pump, which is this guy right here, was filled to the top. So I knew that I at least had that much fluid inside. So I knew it was going to drain. That's why I pulled it back. Now, once I pushed the car once I dropped the car to the bottom, I realized it was going to leak, and that's when I put the pan here. So honestly, I know I was saying at the beginning not to drain it, but it would be advantageous to really pull that drain plug here. Now that I'm looking at this, honestly, I think if you're going to be doing the water pump, you should really just drain the coolant from the get-go. So I'm going to leave that on the video there, only to prove that we're human, and honestly, I am completely retracting those comments. I think you should drain the coolant from the engine as well, in order to avoid so much there. Luckily, like I said, with my driveway, I caught it, but completely wrong, guys. I'm human. So drain the coolant from all locations. So let's take the thermostat out. So I have one here, and you have your little gasket that goes around the thermostat ring, and then you have another little O-ring here. So let's see what mine looks like. My understanding, or should I say, last couple times that I did it, you just had to make sure. So you squeeze it, and there you go. Now you can just pull this guy out. Be very careful. So there's that first gasket. You want to look to see if you have any spacers in here, which looks like I don't. So we're good to go. So I mentioned spacer when I was looking through there, but here it is on top of it. So that's the orientation for it. So you have your retaining clip, which sits on top, your spacer for that, and then the gasket around the thermostat, which is this guy over here. So you got to remember to put them back in that same order. I knew, again, it's been a while, but I knew there was a spacer to this guy. And once I came over here, I realized I found it there. So let's clean these guys up and get ready to install them in the new one. The spacer up. You simply place thermostat in the water pump, then the spacer, and now we install the retaining clip here. And again, we're gonna have to grab the pliers, squeeze them together, and then set it. So I'm gonna do that here in the next one. All right, so you squeeze it together, slide it all the way in. That's pretty much it. Now what we need to do is grab a screwdriver now very carefully and go around the edges so it actually sits where it needs to. We're gonna show you on the old one here. So if you look at, there's actually a small ridge right there where it needs to sit. And because of the spacer and because of the thermostat being, it's brand new, it's gonna be a little bit difficult, but the goal is to just pretty much push. So here we are, I placed a water pump, and I used, of course, the studs that were there for alignment. I also put a tiny bit of grease on the gasket before I put it in place. So the gasket went on first, just a little bit of grease, just so you can kind of align it. Even though it goes on the studs, the holes are a little bit bigger, so you want to make sure that it fits correctly so it doesn't, you know, kind of like sit a little bit offset. So once you put this in place, you want to start doing the bolts, and you got 2 here, and you're going to have the 2 up here, or you can actually do the 3, and that's just to make sure that the gasket stays in place. And these will all be tightened to 8 Newton meters. I'm not sure what that translates into foot-pounds, but regardless, you want to go 8. Whether it's a torque wrench or it's a dedicated wrench to 8. Again, 8 Newton meters for all. Bolts in place, and like I was saying, we're going to tighten it to 8 Newton meters, but I wanted to point something out. Well, a couple of things. Number one, this here is for a block plate. In the event that you want to install one, and say you got that little guy there, that actually taps out there. I'm actually going to be pulling this guy out. I did that on the last water pump, so I'll be pulling that guy out since it's already sealed. And you can put another one in reverse if you want to, but eventually that will be coming out. I should have done that prior to install. I also wanted to kind of show the torque wrench that I use. It's a 1/4 inch, and it's essentially a tension one. So you just kind of pull this guy down, and as it's tightening up, the gauge goes up, and once it hits 8, you know you're done. I really like doing this because, especially when you're doing it in shifts now, in sequence, it really makes sense. I've not found anything that says this needs to be torqued in a specific sequence, but I usually like to just start from the center and then work my way out whenever you're dealing with anything. Again, I haven't found any literature that says that you have to do it with this, but whenever you're doing anything, you usually start in the middle and then push your way out. That way the unit, you know, flexes and sits flush. So let's go ahead and do that all the way to 8 Newton meters. Are in place. Everything's done. The only thing left to do is to fill it with coolant. Now I still have one more project. I actually found, and I'm going to do another video on it. Notice the timing marks. It shifted on me again, and what I found was in here there was a little bit of a play with the woodruff key, and doing my research, it turns out that unfortunately not being tight enough spins it around. So we're going to be replacing the cam. I'll be doing the video on that one there, so I wanted to point out, and that's what originally I think was causing some of the misfires that I was having. But regardless, it's installed. Normally what I would do is I would loosen this hose here and then use this hose to pour coolant up until about right here, and then likewise I would put a funnel here and fill it up with coolant so that I can get it back into the block here. Sometimes people just use the highest point, which is here, and then try to fill it up. However, I've found that it's easier to use all 3. So I'll start here, and then once it, like I said, once it reaches about right here, I stop pouring, and then I do the block until I can see the coolant up to this level. I then bring the hose down, clamp it, or should I say tighten it down, and then I start pouring here. Now there is a little breather right here, and this is your vent. So we do have to also vent the system so that no bubbles. And one of the easiest way to do it that I found is once you've filled everything out, is you start the car and you loosen this bolt. You wait for bubbles to start showing, which means it's at normal operating temp. And once you see the bubbles, you close it. And you leave it running, and then you take the cap off there for a little bit. And once you see bubbles coming up through there as well, you close it, and you turn the car off for a little bit. let it cool down, and then come again, take that off, and you repeat that process 2 or 3 times, venting it here while you have this guy open. There is some pretty extravagant ways of doing it. Some people have actually put a little nipple there and put a hose up here and just kind of vent it through. I found that works, and honestly, I usually have to do that 3 or 4 times and for the next couple of days. You have to be really careful because of the pressure there. But again, venting the cooling system, some people do not do, and it can be very dangerous for the vehicle. You also have to remember, when we took this hose off, that was completely empty. So you want to run it with the heater on as well, so that everything, all the cooling, fills every single gap that needs to fill. And you just keep filling that guy up and doing the process. If you go to various 944 forums, you'll find a whole bunch of different methods. That's the method that works for me. I've done it several times, and again, very successful. So we're going to go that route. Oh, but again, that's pretty much it. Water pump is installed. Again, I'll be taking the cam off, so I'm not going to show the finalized portion of it there, but now it's just a matter of bringing all the cover back on. And I have other videos that showed how to do that part of it as well. But that was a water pump. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. You guys have a great one.